Hi everyone, my name is Natul Middlebrook and welcome to my kitchen. So let's see what you're gonna be serving this week. So now that you know what you're gonna be serving, I am going to talk to you a little bit about your ingredient list. So when I go to the grocery store, I always make sure that I buy my sacred trio for my foundation of cooking, which is onions, carrots, and celery. So of course that's gonna be included here, but I wanna talk a little bit about substitutions. You'll notice I'm carrying some mushrooms and our pasta sauce. If you don't like mushrooms, that's okay, take them out. It's not gonna hurt anything. So any of these items are interchangeable. I'll be talking a little bit more about that, but this right here is what's going to create my 5 fabulous dishes this week. Ready to get started? If you want to save lots of times, you can just buy chicken stock. You can get it at your grocery store. I would just make sure that it's organic and that it doesn't have all these crazy 3, 4, 5 syllable fillers in it. I really recommend you making your own chicken stock, chicken broth. The flavor is, there's just not a comparison between store-bought broth and what you're gonna be able to make at home. Now for everybody's least favorite part, including mine, that I just want to show you exactly how I take my whole chicken out of its packaging. I let it slip out, and yes, all the gooey water comes out. And then remember that inside there's always extra goodies, which I don't use except for about Thanksgiving or Easter time. But I'm going to take the neck bone and the gizzards and all that stuff that you're probably not going to want. But then I'm just going to be sure to trim off the fat. I do want to keep the skin because I want some of the fat, but I don't want a lot of extra fat. And so I'm just taking the extra skin and fat little nodules that kind of hang out here at the back. So that's what I'm doing. And then sometimes there's a little tail still attached. I don't see one here. It's called the Pope's nose. If it's there, you can just trim that off too. And then I kind of give it a good crack right there to flatten it out. I rinse it out. And now this little chicken is ready to fly. So making sure you have a soup pot, what you're going to do is put your chicken in there, and there she is. I'm just gonna dump her in there. It doesn't matter. Well, I say that, her legs are sticking straight up. You definitely don't want her legs sticking straight up, but she's just kind of laying down there. I have 8 cups of water right here. So while my chicken stock is working up its boil action, I'm gonna cut up my vegetables and brown the meat for my bolognese sauce. I think peeling garlic is so much work. I will be honest, sometimes I get it in a jar with oil, but it never is the same. There is nothing that compares with fresh garlic. So if you're gonna take the time to break it all into pieces, you might as well cut it all at the same time. So let me show you some things about garlic. You see a little bit of the green stem in the middle. That's actually kind of bitter. So sometimes what I do is I cut the garlic in half, and then I just try to take that out. You can cut off the little stub there at the end, but honestly, I don't. I just make sure that I mince it so fine that you can't even pick up on that. And you basically just throw your knife in there and then hold the little strays with this hand, and then you can even work your way up like this. Look, I'm not even looking. And then you bring them together again. You slide the ones that are stuck to your knife, and then you run it through again. If you prefer smaller cut vegetables, then you can actually cut your carrots and your celery at the same time that you're cutting it for your soup and your pasta sauce. I like my chicken soup to have bigger chunks of carrots and celery, so I choose to do it separately. But just giving you options. And then since the onion is gonna be the same size for both the sauce and the chicken stock, I am just going to cut these all at the same time, and I'm gonna split them in half. I'm gonna dump half in this bowl, and then I'm gonna dump the other half in this bowl. And then I'm gonna start cutting these veggies. So they say that chopping your onions with a super sharp knife is gonna minimize the gases bothering your eyes, and chewing gum. Quite frankly, I have never found that it helps me a whole lot, but I always carry some gum in my drawer so that I can start chewing it and show you how to cut an onion without crying. I have the garlic in here for my chicken fricassee, and then I'm gonna cut my 1 red bell pepper. Again, make sure you always start with a really, really sharp knife. And I have to tone my knife through the cooking process because, you know, I always want it as sharp as it can be. And then I'm gonna take this red bell pepper, which I already washed, and I'm gonna get as close to the top as I possibly can, and I'm just gonna run my knife through it. And I'm gonna run my knife through the bottom, and then I'm going to go from top to bottom on the side. And what I do is I'm cutting the ribs of the bell pepper, and I'm just unrolling it. You just have to be careful here that you don't cut yourself. I hold on to this side and I just kind of run my knife through it. And then I get rid of that. So in my hand, here I have about a 1/4 bunch of cilantro and about a 1/2 bunch of parsley. Now, if you don't want to mess with the cilantro, I use it because it is a classic pairing with things like bell pepper and cumin, spices that I'm going to use for my chicken fricassee. But if you want, just cut the parsley. Take a little bit over half or cut the whole bunch while you're at it. We are gonna mince this much like we mince the garlic, and I like to keep the stems. There's so much flavor in the stems. You can keep them for the next batch of chicken stock. So I put half the cilantro in here for my chicken fricassee, and then I'm gonna save the other half for my pinto beans that I'm gonna be making later for my Latin infused bowls. I'm not gonna make the pinto beans today because honestly, they're so easy. I pop them out of a can. I'm gonna season them, add a little bit of cilantro. They're gonna be good to go. Whew. The hardest part is done, all the food chopping. But for those of you who don't feel super confident in your knife skills just yet, you could always take all the ingredients that go in the pasta bolognese and run it through the food processor along with the parsley that goes in it. So you don't have to mince garlic, you don't have to mince parsley, you can just throw it in the food processor, bzz, 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 and it's done. The trick to a really smooth bolognese sauce is the way you break up your meat. You want it to be even, and you want it to be in the smallest bits you can. So as you can see, I'm still working my way through this meat. I'm making sure that I'm constantly breaking it up because I don't want any really huge chunks. And then I'm just gently flipping it over to make sure that I'm just cooking it thoroughly. So hopefully you have a strainer, just, you know, the strainer that you use for your pasta. It may not look exactly like this, but you definitely want to run your meat through it. Here's the really, really fun part, y'all. I find it so satisfying just to pour all of my vegetables in here. And then I'm going to cook them for about 5 minutes. I'm going to stir them through the meat, and then I'm gonna season it with about 1.5 tablespoons of salt. And the reason I season it now is because the salt helps cook the aromatics and the mushrooms a little bit faster. Remember, aromatics is the term that people use to refer to fragrant vegetables like onions and garlic and celery. The trick to an amazing pasta is to add a good drinking wine, any red wine that you would drink, and I'm gonna increase the heat. And for this amount of meat, I'm adding about 1.5 cups. Now you see that it's in here. I'm going to crank up the heat because I do want the alcohol to evaporate, and all I want left is that delicious winey flavor. There, I'm gonna add a bay leaf. A bay leaf is considered a very essential ingredient. I use them all the time. I have some dry basil, so I'm gonna use a little bit of that. Watch guys, I'm just putting about a teaspoon. That looks about a teaspoon, right? I'm putting that, and then I'm going to break it up. When you break it up, it kind of releases the flavors. You know, you're breaking it up and creating more of a surface area. So I'm adding about a teaspoon of that, of the basil, and then a teaspoon of oregano. I have some fresh basil because I am growing some. I'm going to slice it up, but if you don't have fresh basil, that's okay. Dry basil is just as good. I just like to layer flavors. So I'm gonna give it one more stir. And then I'm going to let this reduce quite a bit so that the sauce thickens. And my trick is I cover it partially. Oops, there's my timer for my rice. So I'm going to give it a taste and see what it is missing. Remember, your taste buds are your guide. If you don't trust your taste buds, have someone from your house taste it, let you know what it needs. Here's why this sauce is so amazing. The wine gives it so much depth and so much flavor. Now I'm gonna show you how to make some rice. Trick to cooking a stellar pot of rice is two things. One, I like to saute the rice a little ahead of time. It's called the peel-off method. It releases just the fragrance of the rice and flavors. I put a little bit of olive oil on the bottom of my pan. So the second thing is you always need a little less water than the packaging says. So I want you to see how the rice has a little bit of color. I don't know if it's picked up by the camera, but there's some of the grains are a little light brown, but the rice is glistening and just begging for a little bit of water. So I am going to put 5.5 cups of water in here, and just be careful because it's really, really hot, so it could splatter a little bit. So just go real slow at first. Do you hear that sound? Before I put the lid on, I'm going to taste it. I don't know why, there's no butter in it, but it tastes buttery from like just the flavors that have been released in the rice. I am gonna put just another little dash of salt. I'm gonna cover it with a tight fitting lid, and then I'm going to simmer it. Ready for the perfect pot of rice. You see the little holes in there where the steam escaped. It's not soggy. I'm gonna let it, it's pretty hot. I'm gonna let it air out for, just kind of dry out for a little bit, and then I'm gonna take what I need for my chicken soup. So one thing I want you to know is that just a couple of times in about the hour and 15 minutes that this has been cooking, I do go ahead and push it in. If I see a leg that's sticking out, I kind of push that in. So as the water evaporates, you are going to see a little bit more of the chicken. But the way I know that it's ready, you see how that comes apart so easily? That leg just wants to come with you. Well, that means that meat is so ready. You don't want to overcook it if you're going to use the meat, because then it just kind of disintegrates. So what I do, it's just so tender, y'all. I really just carefully, sometimes it comes in one piece, but most of the time it's gonna break up. So using the same bowl that I put the chicken in a few minutes ago, I took the chicken out and put it on the cutting board because I want it to cool off a little quicker. And then I'm gonna take my broth and I'm going to very carefully run it through the strainer that I rinsed out because I used it earlier. And I wanna be careful because I don't want it to spill outside of the bowl. Now, if you're using a metal bowl, be careful because it is going to be hot. It's gonna heat up very quickly with this hot broth. But you see, I'm just making sure I dump as much of it out. I'm gonna cool this pot off and rinse it out because that's what I'm gonna use to make my chicken soup. So I've had my veggies sauteing in here for about 10 minutes until the onion is translucent. And now it is ready for my freshly homemade chicken stock that's gonna add so much flavor to it. So I've got my cooked chicken here and I have 2 containers. This one's gonna go into my chicken soup, and this one's going to go into my bell peppers with the cilantro and the garlic. I'm just gonna toss it in there because I'm gonna cook it later this week. I work by taking all of the meat off the bone, I throw away the bone, I save the skin for the dogs, and then I separate it into each bowl. I'm reserving the chicken breast with the tenderloin for my bowls later this week, and then I'm gonna cut up all the dark meat and some of the white meat, and I'm gonna put it in my soup. All right, guys, I've run out of quiet time in my house. The kids are back. They actually never left. They were upstairs confined to the game room. There they are. But I want to let you know, once the carrots are almost tender, that's when I'm going to add the chicken that I cut up right there. I'm going to add about 1.5 cups, a heaping cup of rice. I'm going to put it in there. And then I'm going to season it. Look at that yummy deliciousness. Not only is it gonna fill your belly with warm goodness, but it's also so good for you, highly nutritious. Now I know what you're thinking, don't knock the cabbage casserole until you've tried the cabbage casserole. So I'm taking my cabbage and putting it in boiling water. I put about a tablespoon of salt in there. While I'm waiting for my cabbage to soften, I'm going to put the remaining rice into this casserole dish, but hopefully the kids will kind of get lost in the fluffiness of the rice and the cheese that's gonna come in here. To pull out my very delicious cabbage casserole. Cheese just makes everything so yummy. You guys, it's just got such a great texture. It's also very, very highly nutritious. I've got some parsley there, some cheese, some of the ground meat, and some of the chicken stock. Can't wait to taste it. So I'm kind of running behind schedule today, but that's okay because I meal prepped at the beginning of my week and I have my shredded chicken waiting for me with the chopped bell peppers, garlic, and cilantro. I am making what's called a fricassee. In Spanish, it's fricassee, and basically it's just a braised meat cooked with vegetables. Some fricassee is made with a white sauce, but I grew up eating it in a tomato sauce with a lot of olive oil. So now that my olive oil is heated up, I'm just going to carefully do a Tupperware dump. So easy, don't have to mess with chopping this today. I do want to make sure, however, that I get every bit of garlic and cilantro that's in here. I'm going to, now remember, the chicken's already cooked, but my bell peppers are not. So I really want to make sure I give it a good saute. I'm going to bring this just a slightly bit closer. We don't have to worry about socially distancing ourselves today. But look how pretty that is. That red bell pepper is going to give it so much flavor. Now, I did have some of the organic boxed chicken broth that I bought at the grocery store when I bought my chicken, because I did not make enough chicken stock or broth to last me through this, but that's okay. That's why it's always good to have a backup box in your pantry. And so about 1 cup is good. Now I'm going to season this bad boy. I'm gonna use cumin. I love the smokiness and the flavor, and it just makes it very distinctively Latino. Or Latina, or Latin. Let's just say Latin. So I'm going to put about a tablespoon of that. And I didn't put onions in it because I didn't want to overwork us on meal prep day. And so I just knew that we would add some onion powder instead. We do have some delicious garlic in there. I'm going to lower my heat. I'm going to sprinkle in about, I'm gonna say 2 teaspoons of salt. I already did one earlier. I'm gonna do the second one. And then of course, freshly ground pepper. You want to be generous with this because this is such a rustic dish. You just want the flakes of ground pepper to contrast with the smoothness of the chickens and the sweetness of the bell pepper and the acid in the tomatoes. This is so good. One ingredient I forgot to mention, and it is most critical, is smoked paprika. That is one of my top 7 spices that I use. So while this is slowly simmering, remember the can of pinto beans that I told you to get? I loosely drain these. And it's not a ton, you know, it's just this one can, but it's going to be used for our bowls. So it's going to go for about 6 people. I had reserved some cilantro from my meal prepping on Sunday, and I am just going to pour it in there. If it looks like it's too much, I'm going to save a little bit to add a little zing. To reheat the rice, I always just add a little bit of water, just like a little sprinkle of water before I microwave it. While my rice is cooking, I ate half an avocado for my lunch, or with my lunch rather. So I'm going to slice this up as a garnish for my So remember, this isn't a fancy schmancy bowl. This is a homemade, real fast food that you can make for your family. So I was able to prep this healthy-ish, very homey bowl in about 10 to 15 minutes. And I put some tortilla chips. You could also add some fresh pico if you have it. You could add cheese if you really want to have some cheese. So here, let's take a bite. Look, it's all steamy. That fricassee, for it not being real fricassee, has so much flavor. The smoked paprika really, really is the trick. And then these beans don't taste canned at all. They tasted like they were made with love by Goya and with a little love for me. About 4 zucchinis, and this is enough for my husband and I, and then some. But do not throw these away.